God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not that light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh, made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one only, the only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. We celebrate here in the Advent season the one who is from the beginning. Christ is called the Word in John's Gospel, and our Lord was in the beginning. The Advent season celebrates the one who is from the beginning. Now, while Matthew, Mark, and Luke record events of Jesus' life and Jesus' ministry as they occurred historically, the Gospel of John, scholars don't tell us that it was really out at least not much less than 100 years after Jesus' birth. And so John is writing decades after the first three Gospels have come out, or the Gospel of John appears decades later. And it's as if by this time, other Gospels had told us the accounts of Jesus' life and ministry, and now it's become important to really emphasize who Christ truly is. And John identifies Christ with the word logos, a word that can be translated, well, it's translated word, it could also be translated meaning. But even beyond the Jewish population of those days, there were people in the world who could understand this concept of logos, associating it with the very thing that holds all of creation together. And so in the beginning is Christ. And so it is as if the Gospels have already noted that what Christ has accomplished really does matter. And by now we can begin to understand that what Christ is doing is all that does matter. Christ is the Logos. He is the Word who is from the beginning with God. And verse 10 tells us that the world came into being through the Word, yet the world did not know him. We see the Lord, who is the Creator, coming to that very creation that is his own, and yet the creation does not receive him. It was not that the Lord failed to recognize his own creation, but that the world did not recognize the Lord, the very one who is from the beginning. The Lord comes to his own do not receive him. And this is to say that the world had come to experience a different kind of normal. Things were not just a little bit, with a few things out of place, but there was a sense that it was entirely out of order. The Lord still recognizes his own creation. It's just that the world does not recognize him. In more recent generations of our own day, we have come up with this acronym SNAFU, which means situation normal, all fouled up. It doesn't always get pronounced just that way, but that's what it means. But it's a sense that there's a new normal. And the new normal is a mess. And we even seem to acknowledge that in a lot of our conversations when it gets a little bit cynical. But Christ comes to his own, and his own do not receive him. There are even descriptions in the gospel accounts when Christ comes to church. Now, they didn't call it church. They called it synagogue in those days, but it was essentially a church, and it was where the Lord belonged. It was his own people. And yet, it was as if they were in bondage, and they needed deliverance, but they had found a way to live under bondage. And they had found a way, even in bondage, to kind of get comfortable. They were in a world that was all messed up, but that was okay because they had found ways to become comfortable in the world. And so, for Christ to come to really set them free, that just wasn't really convenient at that time. They weren't so sure they needed that. In fact, they had a very adverse reaction to the way the Lord spoke to them regarding God's will for their nation. And so when they were singing this song of God and country, the Lord explains that the right priority is that God is far above country. They really don't have a country, and yet they will hear none of that. Now, it's kind of, I guess the best way I can explain it is that the ones who really rejected the Lord, I hesitate to say it, but they were the ones whose preparation was similar to my own, having been through something like seminary. And in all they had learned, they had a sense that what Jesus brought was some new agenda that was contrary to theirs, and they were convinced that they knew God better than anyone else. And so when the Lord speaks to them directly, it doesn't fit what they expected. And they had agendas. They perceived the Lord had an agenda, which the Lord does have an agenda. In fact, the Lord's agenda is the agenda that serves best for the whole created order. But when the Lord comes to his own, it's not convenient to them. I can't make perfect sense of it, but it is that I must receive Christ who comes contrary to my own natural human tendencies. I believe it. And yet when Christ comes, it's just not the way I am. And my whole being seems to react against it. And yet this is our hope. The gospel speaks of the Lord in the beginning. Christ was and is from the beginning. And yet, we cannot really experience that unless we understand something of Christ beginning with us. I really need to know how it is that Christ begins with me, even where I might be the most resistant to Christ. But we are called. And simply to be asked the question this evening, how does our Lord begin with us? We can be sure that Bethlehem is just as real in southwestern Indiana today as it was in those days in Judea. In fact, the Lord came then where there was no room for the Lord. He begins in very humble circumstances, among very common people, in very humble conditions. This is how the Lord begins. And the initial reaction is that the people who are in bondage, who might be set free, have come to be comfortable just the way they are and do not want to get unsettled. Christ comes to his own do not receive him, but to as many as do receive him, the Lord gives the power to become children of God. Children born not of the flesh or a husband's will, but born of God. Christ comes to dwell among us, to tabernacle with us, to share with us in our very own conditions. And to as many as receive him, the Lord gives them the power to become the children of God, so that the one who has called us is faithful and will do this. The one who began a good work in us will bring it to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. And Christ is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And so